let me tell you why I came to the conclusion that the best option for me for living was in a small confined space in the form of this little camper. Now, at 71 years old, I found myself on my own with limited funds, savings, and had a small job at that time, but that has since ceased. Now, I managed to get a pension, which is again small. It's I'm grateful for it. Don't get me wrong, but it's very limited. And in New Zealand, the cost of rental is just dreadful. Plus, they're very scarce, very, very hard to find a place. There's waiting lists and everyone crying out. And as a single person, I think, why would I take up space that a family could live in? It just seems um, just not cost productive. That's the word, but yes. So I had to come. This is how I came to understand where my decision making was coming from. Was the fact that I had to come to terms with living in a small space, and in order to do that and come to terms with it, I had to think, well, what is space? It's just the emptiness between objects, between the walls, the ceiling, and the floor. And how much of that space do I really need? Now, if you look at your normal everyday movements, you're asleep basically 8 hours of the day in a horizontal position, if that's what you prefer, which most of us do, I think. And then the rest of the time is spent maybe in the bathroom, using the toilet, shower, using those facilities per day, what, 3/4 of an hour? Maybe some people use more time there. Oops, kicked it. Because it's the only room in the house with a lock. So you tend to find solitude there if you're in a busy family and you want some peace and quiet. I know quite a few people who resort to hibernating in the toilet. But anyway, I digress again. Um, yes, but normally, if you look at it that way, you don't spend a lot of time in a bathroom. And what else do we need? Oh, we need cooking facilities and prep, food prep. Again, how much room do you need? Not a great deal. And if you're like most people in my age group, we tend to not want great big meals, and we don't really want to be fussed with making a lot of, unless it's a hobby and you love cooking and baking, and there's a lot of people who do that, and they will spend a lot of time in the kitchen. But for me personally, my days of slaving over the hot stove are long gone, and I have a simple meal at tea time or dinner time. Lunchtime, I'm trying to eat more then, and that sort of works because it's daytime and there's more space to do it. And I was doing that anyway when I was renting a place, so no difference really. What else do we need? We've got a bed, we've got our bathrooms. Yeah, basically. I mean, oh yes, and then in the evening you want to sit and lounge in a comfy chair or sofa and watch TV. And how much space do you need? Again, you're sitting down most of the time. If you're standing in the kitchen cooking, I've seen people scrolling on their phones watching stuff, and yeah, they don't really want to be there. It's different. It's a lot different these days to how we were when we were kids. Now the space, getting back to that, that's where I realised that really I'm paying for space. I'm heating it in the winter and I'm cooling it in the summer, and the larger that space is, the more costly it is. So if you kind of suck the air out of a house and make it smaller, then you end up with a smaller place. What can I live in? What are the options for small spaces? And it was caravan or a camper or a van. A lot of people live in vans. And yeah, I chose the camper in the end because the layout was just how I wanted it. It was the bed above the cab, meant that the bed was made up all day. I didn't have to muck about with that. I've got a seating area where I'm sitting now, where four people could, if they were friends, could sit closely and enjoy a meal. And then I have a couch over on the other side of it. There's the bathroom behind. Oh, actually, there's the fridge behind me with a cupboard underneath that I store medicines and cosmetics, that sort of thing, bathroom supplies. And then behind the fridge, keep going backwards, is the toilet shower. And the little kitchen, which I thought when I moved in here was going to be way too small. But in actual fact, I made a little shelf and in the doorway, and that's more than adequate. That's where I put the dishes. That was the thing I didn't really have, was somewhere to place dishes when I was washing them so that I could dry them when I finished. And that's worked out fine. And having lived in the van now, dare I say it, I'm finding it too big. But it's the truth. But anyway, that's another story. But getting back to weighing up whether you should live in a house or something like this, not exactly the same maybe, but getting down to a small space, I touched on the cost of heating and cooling, and that's a lot to consider. And when you think about it, a lot of the time we're not even in the house. We're away. We're out doing our hobbies or visiting friends, working, whatever it might be, going to school if you're doing that. For younger people, if you might have a cat or a dog, they're the only ones that are going to be using it. And so you're paying for aircon for a cat to sleep all day. They have a great life, don't they, cats? I'm coming back as a cat if I can. Anyway, yeah, basically you can do everything that you need to do in a small space. And I find that cleaning, for example, um, the cost for cleaning in a home, I was a slave to it. The cost of all the different equipment, like vacuum cleaners, and we had wooden floors in the last one, and that had required special treatment. You couldn't just treat it like anything else. There was carpet in other areas, so you had to look after that. All the windows, there's so many more windows. Everything is just multiplied and expanded on, so you're a slave. That's how I see it. You're a slave to it, and it's really costly. And then in the weekends, if you're working, you come home and you're a slave to the lawns and the whole maintenance, cleaning the gutters and all that sort of thing. Not even looking at the costs of utilities like your water, power for your electricity, and any other services that you may have to pay for. Whereas in the van, I have a solar panel which charges my battery, and I basically use the battery for all my appliances and electronics. So yeah, I think the idea of living in a small space makes a lot of sense. It's not for everybody maybe, but for those of you who might be considering it, and the reason why you might be looking at this video is to think about it. It all comes down to space. That space, when you're in your home, no matter how large it is or small it is, look at the space that's just never used. It's oxygen. You're paying for it. You're paying through the nose for it. In fact, do you really need all that space? I know that if it's raining in here and you might say, oh yes, I'm going to get claustrophobia, and I suffer from claustrophobia. But to be honest, with the glass windows and the ability to just step outside, it's basically I live in a room. It's probably actually the same size as your bathroom. It's probably smaller than your bathroom actually. But I can do everything I need to do in this small space. And I'm a craftsperson, and there is no reason why I can't continue with those. I have a good table here that's adequate in size. I can do anything that I want to do, like art, painting, that sort of thing. And a lot of my crafty things I like to do are probably dirty and messy, so I tend to do those outside, like pottery. So having all that space, does it really make us any happier? I don't think so. I really don't. I think with with the ability to be able to, in my case, get into the vehicle and drive somewhere else. If the neighbour's dog's barking all day, I can easily just drive somewhere else where it's not barking if it's getting on my wick. If I want to go to the beach, I can set up camp there. In the winter, when it's raining and it's pretty miserable inside, there are other options. You can visit friends, you can go to the library, you can go shopping, you can do chores that maybe you didn't want to do on a nice day, like, just tending to different necessities in life. So, yeah, give it some thought. You have options, and that's always a nice thing to have is options. And I know this option for me, I grabbed it because once I got over the fact that it was just space, that's all I was losing was space that I couldn't even afford anyway. It was out of my league. And at the end of the day, you've got to do what makes you happy.